So, okay, you got your slab leveled, and then you end up in Charlie Peacock, the art house. That's a pretty interesting place to end, like where you were coming from and where you were at in life. That's a very peculiar place to land.
There were always things I was hungry for, right? Even in those times of confusion. And Charlie Peacock himself was a very interesting thread woven through certain parts of my life. During those years when I wasn't sure what to believe, there was this artist whose music I loved and who for whatever reason would come to Dallas frequently, which was about 5 hours drive from Tulsa.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly it.
And so my roommate Nick and I would drive down to see him. He would play there maybe 3 times a year, and we would always wait in the line at his table till the end, till everyone else had left, so we could talk to him. And he was one of my lifelines in that when I would see him do a concert, the things he would share from the stage, the honesty, the integrity, the way he wore his Christianity was so appealing. I was just hungry for it. It was like, there's something real here that I haven't gotten a lot of the places that I've been. And so there really was something about him in particular that was one of those little catalysts that kept me believing, that kept me hanging on, that, okay, there's somewhere to get to. There's something to say. I'm not quite sure how to articulate what it is that I see in him, but there's something there that I want, and I want that kind of faith. So when out of the blue, he extended the invitation to Nick Barré and to me to move to Nashville, to be a part of helping to launch the Art House Foundation, this new nonprofit venture that Charlie and his wife Andi were in the process of starting. It was unbelievable.
Right.
And
You're just
to this,
fans, right?
yeah, and to this day, if you ask Charlie why he invited us, because he didn't know us, we had a few conversations. He'll just kind of shrug and be like, I don't know, I just kind of had a instinct about it.
Seemed good at the time. I needed some worker bees. You guys look like worker bees.
Yeah. So, of course we both said yes. He was one of our heroes at the time. So we moved to Nashville, and those early days of the Art House, those early years, were so important in the formation of my thinking, because not only did the Art House, in a very consciously, sit on the shoulders of the Schaeffers and of Labrie, and of Francis Schaeffer's thinking about culture and art, and of Edith Schaeffer's thinking about hospitality and family and service. But there were also these direct connections, like a guy named Marvin Paget, who had lived and served on the staff of, I can't remember if it was Swiss Labrie or one of the others for a couple years, but who was still on the board of directors for the Schaeffer Foundation, but now lived in Nashville. He almost immediately, when the Art House opened, started teaching a weekly systematic theology class.
Oh, interesting.
And as it turns out, only 3 people went to it, and that was Nick and me and my wife, Lisa. We had just gotten married. So it was actually a few months into 'cause Nick and I moved to Nashville in April. My wife and I got married in December. But, within that first year, we were the beneficiaries of that. And there were other conferences and classes and gatherings and talks from just outstanding and thoughtful speakers and theologians and artists. So it was an amazing place to land. It was exactly what I needed on so many levels. And then it's interesting now, the last 10 years, the involvement I've had with the Rabbit Room, a much younger organization. But the Rabbit Room is very conscious of the debt it owes to Charlie and Andi and the art house and the work there. So it's like you have this generational build of Labrie and all the work the Schaeffers did, funneling into the art house, and what Charlie and Andi did there, funneling into the Rabbit Room and the work that the Rabbit Room is doing. So, so I kind of feel like I've been along for the ride for multiple decades here of how those streams that begin with Francis and Edith Schaeffer have made their way, down to the present day.
Hey there, if you've benefited from this content at all, please hit the like and subscribe, or subscribe and like, one of those or both of them together on this video. It helps us tremendously with the math algorithm nerd monsters. Yeah, and to close the circle here with my own story and how I know you and Nick. So I go to Covenant. I have my mind blown by Francis Schaeffer teaching under Jerem Bars, and I just can't believe it. And at some point I was telling, where you talk about your story, and I was like, yeah, I wasn't really raised Christian. I kind of was, but not really. And but there's this guy at church who was a youth group leader, and he used to have like rock bands at the church, but they weren't playing Christian music. They were just like playing whatever. And then when I finally met Nick and I just asked him, I was like, yeah, what was that all about? Like, where did you get that idea? And he told me, I was listening to this guy, Charlie Peacock. He turned me on to Francis Schaeffer. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, the same thing that blew your mind back then just blew my mind, 20 years later. So it was wild that two people coming out of charismatic circles in Tulsa, Oklahoma ended up kind of in a very theologically similar place. What was the art house like physically? What was it? An actual house or an office?
Yeah.
Or
So there were the entire Christian music industry pretty much in the early 90s relocated from Southern California to Nashville.
Okay.
So the labels did that. Most of the big labels. A lot of the artists did so as well. And Charlie was one of those. And he and his wife, probably a couple of years, or maybe it wasn't even that long after they had relocated to Nashville, they discovered that this old Methodist church up on the hill, that they would drive past on their way to and from their house all the time, and had sort of joked about, what if that was ever for sale? Suddenly there was a for sale sign in front of it, and so they ended up buying it, and they already had the stirrings of this vision for the art house, for a place that would be a place of hospitality and a place where people could gather to make this shared journey of what it means to exist at this intersection of art and faith. And, I think at the time, Charlie recognized a real need that still exists today, but that at least in some circles and churches, has been addressed because of the work of the art house and all of the works that rippled out of that over the years. But he was so aware of, at the time, of this crisis for artists in the church, artists in whatever sort of medium, that most churches had no idea what to do with artists or their gifts. Either they were just sort of ostracized and shunned and looked at as like, well, what you're doing doesn't really have anything to do with the kingdom of God, or
Right.
they were looked at in a very utilitarian sense that, oh, you can use your abilities as a brilliant painter to make signs to advertise our youth retreat, but this impoverishment, that foundationally is theological, but there was this real lack of understanding of the place of beauty and wonder in our formation as spiritual beings, who are physically, who are, embodied and spiritual beings who are making this journey towards our Creator. So that was a big part of what the art house was setting out to address, but also to provide a coherent theological foundation for artists who were coming from so many different backgrounds. And, I was a good example of someone who landed there not having a lot of stuff that was making sense to me at the time. I was very much in need of that kind of consistency of teaching and of consideration of things from a scriptural foundation, the way that Schaeffer was so talented at doing and providing, to be able to look at any issue from the standpoint of I think he called it thinking Christianly.
Right.
Maybe was that a Schaeffer term? Yeah. So that was all new to me, as was in those early days, Charlie was really thinking and talking a lot about the idea of Coram Deo, of all of life lived under the gaze of God, of there being no separation between secular and sacred, and of all parts of life being lived as an act of ongoing worship. And so that became very foundational and formational to my thinking and my theology. And I think in the Every Moment Holy books, the prayers that I've written over the last 8 years, much of what I'm doing there, even the overall premise of it, goes back to that idea of Coram Deo that Charlie was talking a lot about in those first couple of years of the art house.